I'm Ian Lurie. I am the founder of Portent. I am, as of a few weeks ago, the chairman and principal consultant, not the CEO anymore, to which I'll find out. Really good. I started Portent in 1990. That was probably Steve back then, our CEO. I started Portent in 1995. We moved into this building a couple of years ago. I still giggle about the fact that we're in this building. I still think it's the most awesome thing ever, so I point it out all the time. A couple things about my talks. First, I always do a link bundle. I will show this again at the end, so don't panic, but a lot of the stuff that I'll talk about, the tools and the blogs and things, they're all in that link bundle. It's all there, so you can just go in there and find it. The slides will also be there. This is my Twitter handle. If you have good things to say about me during the talk, feel free. If not, don't. But if you have a question for me after, just either email me or send it on Twitter. I do actually reply. I'm trying to use this as a really cheap remote, basically. So for those of you who don't know what this talk is about, this is your chance to leave. This talk is about how everything I ever needed to know, I learned. Everything I ever needed to know about marketing, because I don't want to sound like some kind of weird cultural freak. Everything I needed to learn about marketing, I learned playing Dungeons & Dragons, which you will hear me call D&D, well, D&D. There's a bunch of different abbreviations. You'll see a D, an N, and a D, or a D, an ampersand, and a D. Very few people in the know say Dungeons & Dragons. It's more a muddle thing. But, so it helps to get a real quick 1-minute course on what Dungeons & Dragons is. And I will explain this actually first, how many people here have played Dungeons & Dragons? It's okay. Oh, wow. Okay. How many people here know what it is? How many people think it's a cult that destroys people's minds? By the way, there are a couple seats up here. If you want a place to sit, just ask Josh and he'll find you a chair, because we do have lots of chairs around the office. Dungeons & Dragons it's what's called a role-playing game. And in the game, players assume the identity of a make-believe character. Now, they do not dress up. They do not stand up and hit each other. There's a whole other thing for that called the SCA, in which I have not participated, because I don't understand going out somewhere where you know people are going to hit you and doing it on purpose. But you assume the identity of these characters, and you participate basically in a story that unfolds. And it's sort of like a choose-your-own-adventure book on steroids. It's the best way to describe it. You keep your characters on sheets. Believe it or not, there are no video screens involved in this game. You write your characters down with pen and paper, and if you're really heavy into the nerddom of it all, this might be what a game looks like. Okay, you have little miniatures and little mazesy stuff, so you can see exactly what you're doing. This is actually from a different game, and I guess I do know what the game is, because I'm so far down the nerd vortex, it's hard to describe. There are special dice. All these things come together for something like this. Okay, so a typical interaction will be something where this person called the Dungeon Master, the person who leads people through the game, says, you're walking down the hall and you hear this weird sound. And then some moron in your group will say, I charge towards it, yelling as loudly as I can. And then the Dungeon Master says, you're being attacked by all these things. And the player says, oh, I didn't see that coming. And then you start rolling dice. And rolling dice is part of how you resolve conflict in this game. Now there's also this essential component, which is the nerds. Gotta have them, otherwise the game doesn't work. There's one person called the Dungeon Master who is the storyteller. And then there's players. There could be anything from 1 to, I don't know, a lot of players. An average group is probably 3 or 4 people. And they all have to actually talk to each other. They don't text. They don't use games, video games. They don't talk through phones. They're actually right there in front of each other, which I actually find to make D&D a somewhat more wholesome experience than playing something like World of Warcraft or whatever, which I also have played a lot. So how did I get into it? Well, when I was 12, my aunt bought me one of the very first Dungeons & Dragons rule sets that were available to kids like me. My mom did not speak to her for 2 months. Because at the same time, this book came out called Mazes and Monsters, for people who are around my age, with a movie where Tom Hanks plays this kid who has all sorts of problems in his life, and basically assumes the identity of his character and goes running around in the sewers of his town and never snaps out of it. Spends the rest of his life playing that character. I've never heard of that happening. I don't know anyone who has become, a hobbit or something and spends all their lives walking around, but that was what people thought. Now, in my innocence, I thought, this is kind of fun, so I went to some of my friends at middle school. I said, hey, do you want to come play this game? And the word got around, and I sort of became social roadkill within seconds. It was amazing how fast. Actually, I was pretty far down that road already, but it didn't really help. So I didn't really have any gaming buddies. I more had people to chase me around the playground and beat the shit out of me. I just kind of dealt with it for a few years. And you have to indulge me for a second, because I do have a message for all the pin-headed morons who used to chase me around the playground, but now are probably screwing toothpaste tops onto little containers every day, lots of them in a row. And I'm sitting here running this awesome company with these awesome people in this awesome building. And the message, don't worry, there's a shirt on under this, is basically, screw all of you, how do you like me now? There you go. I dare you to say anything bad about how it all came in. So anyway, after a few years, I actually moved to California. When I moved there, a little bit of a culture shock, obviously, but I made some friends, I was hanging out with them, and within a couple weeks, one of my friends says, you look like somebody who plays D&D. I was like, oh God. And they said, how would you like to join our game this Friday? I was like, holy crap, okay. And that was where I learned the first, most important lesson in marketing. Okay, this talk is bookended with the two most important lessons in marketing. The first one is, there is no such thing as a normal person. Okay, forget it. The normal people end up screwing the tops on the toothpaste containers, and they're not normal either. If you can appeal to that weirdness, if you can find the right weirdness, the niche, for whatever it is that you're selling, or the 10 different groups of weird, you're completely set. That is how marketing works. It's how it has always worked, even when people were just doing television, whatever. An example would be my social life. So as I got older, before I was 25, I actually got interested in girls, right? I'm in high school, girls. And it may be shocking for you, but I had a bit of a hard time on the high school dating scene. I didn't quite know what to do. So the audience was really small, but when you're a teenager, you're not very picky, right? So your audience is everybody female, or everybody male, or whatever. Then I realized I had to narrow my audience down a little bit, right? So this is the beginning of my little niche audience. And then it got narrower. Then it got much narrower. And then it basically narrowed down to one person who I didn't find until I was 27. But the point is, once you find that right audience, it's an easy sale. And that sounds very clinical, and I want to make sure you understand that, there was romantic stuff when I met my wife. Okay, I pointed out binary star systems under the stars, things like that. I brought her flowers. But the other thing was, when I was about to propose to her, I figured I'd better tell her about this little gaming habit. And I felt like I was coming out of the closet to a Baptist minister. I was sure that I was going to be lit on fire and thrown into a ditch somewhere. And she just said, huh, that's interesting. And then she went and told all of her friends. And all of her friends came back and said, that's really interesting. So what's it like? So I'm at a party, right? And they're all coming up to me and asking this. I'm like, can you ask me this later? So anyway, the point is, I found that perfect audience. And that's an extreme example with lifelong consequences, but you can kind of see how it works. And you can learn about this principle from a book. This is actually the cover of the book. I did not find this picture. By Seth Godin, called We Are All Weird. And I am blatantly stealing this idea from him. And he's actually emailed me and said it was okay. It's another example. Cy is a genius. Okay, you laugh, but he is a genius. All right, I suspect that he's one of the smartest marketers in the entire industry, because what did he do? He found this song, he wrote this song, and he said, how am I going to make this appealing to lots of people? Well, lots of people just can't really dance. They think they can, but they can't. Which keep me out of the equation, because there's actually a restraining order against me. I'm not allowed to dance in the state of Washington. I got a pass at my own wedding. My wife said, you know, if you don't want to dance, it's okay. We did, but yeah. So anyway, he found that perfect intersection. He found sort of normal people, this huge group of people who, you know, they want to dance, they want to understand the moves for a song, but usually it's 10 people up on stage doing things that are completely impossible for any normal human being, whereas he's just some dude out there being a complete clown, right? Which is fine. It's what makes him so awesome at what he does. So a more concrete example, on the Portent site, let's say we're trying to figure out how we get more folks to sign up for a particular email drip campaign. So we'll take a look and we'll say, oh, look at this. People who search for our title maker tool on Google or search on the phrase PPC, they seem to be more likely to sign up for this series. And this is a tiny sampling, obviously, but we kind of bore this out over longer periods of time. You start to figure out, okay, if we have people who are searching for pay-per-click and signing up for the email series, they're either going to want training from us or they're going to want to hire us. It's very likely that's the overlap. So we can then take that and test it. Now that's a really nicely organized, false flat, you know, in your lap kind of overlapping niche audience. Usually it's not that easy. Usually it's kind of random. And I actually call those random affinities. And these are ideas that are connected only by the fact that the same group of people like them both. That, by definition, is a random affinities. That's one of the oldest principles in marketing. It happens by accident a lot, but it does happen. So let's say you want to write a book, and you're going to write a book about travel in Europe. And you know you're competing for the same audience as The Lonely Planet. So how can you maybe find some of these random affinities? Well, you can go on to Amazon.com, which is the best marketing tool in the history of man, and you can do a search for the book and then look for products listed under customers who bought this also bought. Find the things that make no sense. I've done this, I've tested it. Find the things that make no bloody sense, and you are probably starting to get a peek into random affinities. And how many books have been sold? If there's only been 2 copies sold, don't do this. But if there's been a lot of copies sold, chances are you're looking at a random affinity. So for example, if you're competing with The Lonely Planet, you know, there's 3 books there that make no sense, right? Not within this context. So I start to think, well, okay, a lot of people who like smoothies and also want to travel. And you're thinking, so what? How does that help you exactly? Well, there's a few things you can do. If you're the author of the book, you can actually take the book and you can, if you want to, add something that no one else has, which is showing little stands that serve different specialty foods, like smoothies, like gelato in Europe, whatever else, and you can actually rate them. But if you're the marketer who's charged with selling this thing, you can just put together some really fun pieces of content, right, that talk about, you know, here's our smoothie tour of Western Europe. Here's the worst smoothie stand we found in Italy, whatever. Picking on Italy, but not doing it on purpose. That's another random affinity you can take advantage of. You can also use a tool like Follow Along. How many people here know about Follow Along? Okay, so check it out. It's owned by a company here in Seattle called Moz. I have no commercial affiliation with them, so I'm not pumping up their items. But you can go on there and search Twitter bios. Search the bios of lots of people who are on Twitter for specific terms. Like, let's say I want to sell something that's for puppies. So I search for puppies, and this guy shows up as number 1 who says he's been known to hand out free puppies. Let's just assume for a minute that that's somewhat germane to puppies. Then I can go look at people who follow him and look at their bios. What else do those people talk about that's not related to puppies? That could very well be more random affinities. Understand, this stuff is a starting point. Okay, it's not an answer. This is where you start to look for these things. But it's at least a place to start. right? You're not just kind of pulling ideas out of nowhere. But you can pull ideas out of nowhere. Your brain's a really good tool for finding random affinities. In fact, it's the best computer at finding them around. There's no other machine well built to do it. Let's say I have a product that's targeting women who are lawyers. Well, I can take a look and I start to think, let's see, most lawyers I know who are guys, they just talk about buying suits, right? And it's a transaction. It's like buying a suitcase or something. You just do it when you have to. Most of the women I've talked to about it talk about apparel or office clothes or formal clothes or whatever else. So I start to think maybe business apparel. I'm not a woman, so I'm kind of guessing. But I can go to Facebook and do a little quick research. So I'll start an ad on Facebook. And when you start an ad, you can pick precise interests and behaviors. So what I did is I went in and looked for a behavior around apparel and business apparel, or suits or whatever, and it showed up, sure enough, under purchase behavior, clothing, women's business apparel, which tells me, okay, that's certainly a better subject, it's a better way to approach it than just saying suits. So again, find the weird. Women think about this stuff a little bit differently, according to this. That's your weird, and that's how you can sort of find a way to make this work, to access that one audience individually. So the rule here is, don't find your audience of 10,000, okay? Find 10 audiences of 1,000, or 100 audiences of 10. No, 100. Yeah, which is funny because the next one is do the math. But the whole point is always look for that weird audience. Always. People used to call it niche craft, finding a niche, finding your target audience, whatever. I love the idea of weird for some obvious reasons, but also because it works. Finding that Venn diagram, finding that overlap is what will always work every time. I've never seen it fail. So next one is do the math. People may not expect this from Dungeons & Dragons, but it is a very mathematical game. There's a lot of math involved. I actually tricked my children into learning their math facts by getting them to play D&D. Now my daughter was she was actually in the end more interested in just learning her math facts than playing D&D, but it's okay, it helped. In Dungeons & Dragons, there's all these numbers you have to know. And depending on the situation, the numbers change. They're added to or subtracted from, they're multiplied by each other, whatever, and they change constantly. The way you advance in the game is totally based on numbers. So you gotta know your math. Now it turns out, oh yeah, terrible joke. Yes, when two people laugh, you know you're completely so just keep going. But it turns out there's really maybe 8 numbers you have to know. And there's really only 2 numbers you have to know that really matter. But you have to know them, you have to have them at your fingertips. You can't be looking for them every single time. Same thing is true in marketing. All right? There's actually 1 number you must know. And it's the value of a visitor to your website. If you do not know that, you got to figure it out. So if you're in a business-to-business environment, you're selling to other companies or to professional customers, you want to know 4 things. You want to know the lifetime value of a customer. You want to know the number, and remember this is all in the link bundle. You want to know how many visitors become leads, and then how many leads become customers, and then how many clicks you get on your website. And if you put all that together, you start to figure out the value of a single visit to your site. That tells you exactly how much money you should spend to acquire a visitor. Right? If you apply your margin to that, then you know right away, okay, this is how much I should spend for a click. There is no reason on earth that every company in the world should not know this. None. And yet, in 18 years, I've found maybe 5 companies that have known it when I walked in the door. I don't know. Business to consumer, same thing, maybe 5 companies, which is even more surprising. You only need to know 3 numbers. Lifetime value, visit to sale, how many visits become sales, and then number of clicks to your site. You immediately can figure out the maximum value of a visitor to your site which means you can apply your margin and you can figure out what you want to spend. Now, this is across all channels, right? So far, we're talking about everything. Once you have this, you can start narrowing it down and saying, okay, from pay-per-click, we can afford to pay this because the conversion rate is different than from organic search, where the conversion rate is lower, so we have to spend less. Whatever, you can start to adjust it, just like in Dungeons and Dragons, where you know those first couple of numbers, and then it all branches out from there. If you don't know those first couple of numbers, you're hosed. Now, a lot of companies say they can't find that value per click because they're a publisher, they do something else different. They say, well, we're not really we don't really get a value from each visitor. And I always kind of say, are you sure? You know, are you going to go bankrupt next week? Are you under a government grant or something? Because you must be making money per visitor. That's what you always have to track back to. So if you're running an election campaign, you can still go back and say, all right, we know that someone who comes to our site 5 times is 300 times more likely to vote for us, okay, from past performance, whatever. Or from TV, we know people who've seen our commercial 3 times, or whatever. We know our budget is X, and we can spend all of it. So divide that by the number of people we want to get to our site, and you start to understand how much you should spend. If you're a publisher, how much is one impression, one page view worth, right? Because those impressions are your inventory. How many impressions do you get per visitor? Now you know the value of a visitor. There is always a way. There's always a way to do it. If you don't know it, you can't do much. That doesn't mean you should just vapor lock and say, oh, never mind. Go home. No more marketing. Because I've had clients say that. You know, maybe we just shouldn't do anything. I'll talk about that in a minute. But what it means is you got to start figuring it out, which may mean that with your first marketing campaigns, you actually have to start figuring out what it does cost and what it is worth to get someone to your site. The other half of the math equation is measuring, right? You got to know what the best numbers are and how things change when they change. In Dungeons and Dragons, that meant a lot of the time sort of measuring how lethal a particular campaign was. Because you make these characters, right? And those characters can simply be bumped up. Maybe a monster chops you in half or something, whatever. So you start to figure out, like if you lose 3 characters in the course of a game, you start to realize maybe I should adjust my character. Well, in marketing, if you start spending all this money and things aren't working, if you're measuring, you can say, okay, maybe I shouldn't be spending all this money. And I mean, you hear about this all the time right now. You hear, oh yeah, big data, big data, big data. Before you do the big data, I'd like to see people get their little data figured out. Okay? Because all these people spending $3 million on these huge analytics platforms and big databases and multiple instances on Amazon or whatever else, they still don't know what the lifetime value of a customer is. And I look at it and I think, why? Any motorsports fans here? It's like buying a Ferrari and putting Pirelli tires on it, where the tires just disintegrate and you crash and die. So you measure lots of stuff. Measure everything you can, but start with some certain really basic, important, vital, critical things. You need to know your conversion rate. If you can improve it, then every channel becomes more productive, right? Everything you're doing makes you more money. You need to improve your site speed. This is a long-standing campaign for me. If you make your site faster, everything else gets better across the board. And then you need to work on content performance. And I don't mean the ability of content to get you a higher ranking in search engines. Please, God, do not come to me afterwards and say, how many articles do I need to write to get a #1 ranking on Google? These windows do open. Just saying. It would be me, not you. Just, yeah, I can't hear that anymore. You can measure click location, right? Figure out what's working. Are people clicking somewhere that has nothing to do with anything that can be clicked? Maybe I should put something there. You can look at scroll length. How far down a page do people scroll? Josh is kind of pained by this one. Oh, God. But actually, it's not that bad if you think about it, because it's got to get all the way to dark purple for an answer. This is a custom tool we have in-house that pulls information about content on a site everything from social media performance to SEO statistics to the number of words on a page to the grade level to the number of headings, and we start to look at it and draw a picture of what ideal content looks like. You don't have to build a custom tool. Avinash Kaushik, who everybody here should know and read all of his stuff, created this sort of custom dashboard that lets you track the performance of content. It is in my link bundle. If you click the link, it will import it into your Google Analytics account if you use Google Analytics, and you'll have that report at your disposal. So, but you can't measure everything. This is the other end of the equation that I frequently see happen, which is then you get clients who say, okay, let's measure how many times we go to lunch. Let's measure how many cars are in our parking lot. Let's measure what the temperature is outside. All of these things may have an effect on our e-commerce lips. See, that's terrible.
But that was perfect.
It was perfectly random. That's right. It's like me getting on that. That's awesome. Yeah. You can't measure everything, okay? And the reason you can't measure everything, and now I can't click through to it.
It's even better. Such a meta.
So meta.
I'm a meta guy. You got to understand that random happens, okay? We are not selling to computers. If we were, none of us would have jobs because you don't need a marketer to sell to a computer, right? The rules are written ahead of time, and everybody figures it out, and then they just sell their stuff. We're selling to highly evolved apes that change their mind all the time. Sorry, in my opinion. According to science, which is generally right. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop. Sorry, I won't go there. I have a picture of Neil deGrasse Tyson in my car. We're selling to people who change their minds, and they change their minds for completely random reasons. You can't always even know why they did it. Now in Dungeons & Dragons, you have these two really pesky forces that are completely random. There are dice, and everyone fails on a 1. Whether you are a god or a rat, if you roll a 1 on this 20-sided die, whatever you were trying to do, you completely fail, sometimes catastrophically. My son was playing a game, and he said, I'm going to throw my axe into the fight and hit the bad guy. And I said, well, just don't roll a 1. He rolled a 1, and the axe went right into the forehead of his friend. That happens. That's random. The other pesky random thing is the players. Okay? If I'm the dungeon master, I could put in a lot of time building out this world, figuring out who they're going to meet, coming up with the overall story arc for the adventure, figuring out what that final big climactic battle will be and where it's all going. And then every now and then, all the players just figure out, hey, let's just go from here to here. And it all gets flushed down the toilet, which is really aggravating, as you can imagine. And the temptation is to try to force them to go in another direction. Why those went off? It's kind of better. Oh, yeah. When they start turning off the oxygen in here, that's when you
It's 8:30.
Yeah, that's right. You can try and force the characters, right? You can say, look, it's really better for you guys. You should go this way. Okay? There's 15 big, ugly, nasty things over here. You shouldn't go there. Which is this phenomenon in gaming called the purple boot from the sky. It just comes down and tells you don't go there. But you're not supposed to do that. Sort of like in marketing, you're not supposed to deceive people or force them into buying one thing instead of another by, say, we have 1,000 of these at the higher price, and we have 2 of these at the sale price. Right? Bait and switch. Very cheesy. Josh, what kind of like?
Does that not work?
It works, well, okay, there's my point. It works for a while, and it works for a while in D&D too. But eventually people find you out. And when they do, it injures your brand, or people stop coming to play, or whatever else. So yeah, but it works a few times. If you have a garage full of crap and you need to get rid of it right now, cheat away.
Details, please.
Yeah, cheat away. If you're trying to run a business that's going to last longer than 3 or 4 weeks, you might want to keep this stuff in mind. So the point here is, people do crazy stuff. They do stuff that makes no sense whatsoever, like flushing 4 days of work, creating a Dungeons & Dragons campaign straight down the potty. You can do research until your pupils weld themselves shut, and you still cannot say, I know with 100% certainty that this is going to work. There is not a chance in hell that you can say that, right? There is no way. Even 50% is pretty amazing. So yeah, have a plan, but know it's going to change and be ready for when it does. Now clients and bosses, whether it's internal and external client, they hate this, right? They want you to say, if we change this one word on this page, you will gain an extra $110, right? That's what they want to hear. You know, exactly what will happen if we make this change? Well, I won't smack you, no. I'm not recording that. Do not record that. Now, it's very hard for a client or a boss to see outside of that. Because think about it, what are they doing? They have to balance the cost and the benefit. So the thing to say to them, the question I'll always ask is, because they'll always say, well, someone else is guaranteeing X or Y. I'll say, doesn't that sound too good to be true? Is that really possible to do that? No, it's not. And they will typically think about it for a while and then agree. Sometimes, though, random people do really cool things. And the randomness goes towards the good. I wrote this blog post and I put it up on our site and I said, okay, I'll tweet it out there. And it got so much attention. I was kind of blown away. I know for some people, you know, oh yeah, ho hum, 991 tweets, whatever. For me, that was kind of mind-blowing. That was awesome. So the point there is random can also be good. And that's part of, by the way, what also makes Dungeons & Dragons so much fun. If you knew ahead of time everything that was going to happen, you'd be reading a book, except you'd be reading it backwards, right? Marketing, in my opinion, is kind of fun because you're trying to maximize the chances of good random instead of bad random. That's all we can do. That's all we'll ever be able to do. Unless people get little computers in their brains and we can just make them do stuff. That doesn't seem like much of a challenge. I'm not really that excited about that. So if you're not going to be afraid of random, there's a whole bunch of other things you should not be afraid of. In gaming, there's this phenomenon where you roll that one, and then you accidentally turn a friend into a frost. Or you throw an axe into their forehead. Or I actually have a friend who has blown me up twice in one evening by accident. I think by accident. The thing is, you should not be afraid of that. Okay? That's the kind of thing that happens in a game. And if you know me, I'm just getting rid of the window here before a message pops up from my son saying, hey, can you come pick me up? No, I'm speaking right now, sorry.
Did you try to come?
Yeah, no, my dog's big. But anyway, I'm not abandoning my son in valor. If you know me, you know how utterly ridiculous it is that I'm the one saying don't be afraid of stuff, because I'm kind of a neurosis wrapped in a phobia inside a personality disorder. So I'm not the most stable of people when it comes to this kind of stuff. But you can't be an entrepreneur or a marketer for 20 years and not learn this. You will go completely insane. You cannot do it. You have to learn to accept that there's some stuff that you can't control. And things are going to sometimes go wrong. Now in gaming, it's pretty hilarious, to be perfectly honest. It's kind of fun. In marketing, it's a lot less fun. But you have to manage the expectations of clients, manage the expectations of bosses, manage your own expectations. Just understand, it's going to happen. Sometimes it'll be good, sometimes it'll be bad. Don't be afraid of scary stuff except for the really scary stuff. Right? And there are things that are really, really scary. These are serious things with permanent consequences. For example, leaving a whole bunch of customers feeling like they just got screwed, especially in the age of the internet. That is not going to do anything good for your brand. Hurting a client's business, knowingly, or at least negligently or recklessly hurting a client's business. That's bad. Okay? Those are the kinds of things you don't want to do. They cause permanent damage to people's lives. They cause permanent damage to a brand. They cause permanent damage to your reputation as a marketer. And when they happen, they can cause this thing that my brother refers to as a cranial rectal inversion. It's where your brain actually moves down into your rear end. And all you do is you sit there and go, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Because that's all you're capable of doing, because of course the other end has moved its way up. What happens then is you start to ignore everything. You completely vapor lock. It's that thing that some of us had when we were swinging from trees and hiding from saber-toothed tigers, that when the tiger jumped out at us, instead of running, we went, and then we got eaten. don't freak out, okay? How you deal with these situations, with the really scary ones, because remember, you're not always the one who causes the really scary stuff. In fact, most of the time it's going to come from somewhere else. I'm going to bring up an example of this in a minute. How you deal with those could make or break your entire career. How you deal with the non-scary, scary stuff, you know, the things that happen here and there, that's important, right? You can show you have class by dealing with those things well. You can help a brand look much better by dealing with those things well. If you're building a website, you can do this thing called defensive design, right? Where if someone fills out a form wrong, it's very graceful in telling them that something went wrong. Those are all the non-scary things, the non-scary, scary stuff. The really scary stuff is things that can permanently destroy your brand and even kill people. So in 1981, someone, don't know, someone's, oh yeah, that's right. They must have actually been, oh sorry, they're good this year. I'm a Mets fan, so I mean I know suffering like no one else. In 1981, some crazy person spiked a whole bunch of Tylenol in the Chicago area with poison and killed 11 or 12 people. Now, if you're Johnson & Johnson, you've got a few options. You can have that whole cranial rectal inversion, hire a whole bunch of lawyers, get a bunch of accountants, start figuring out. It's more expensive to call this stuff back than it is to just pay lawsuits if more people die. And Chevrolet did this with the Corvair, and Ford did it with the Pinto. Okay? And GM just tried to do it with their stupid ignition switches. I mean, that's why it takes 10 years or whatever for them to figure it out. They knew the whole time. So, but what does Johnson & Johnson do? They do a few critical things. First of all, within less than a week after the first case, they had done all of these things. They issued a recall on their product from every shelf in the world. Something like 31 million bottles of capsules. They bought advertising. They bought advertising in every possible medium, warning people not to take Tylenol capsules. They went to every drugstore and every distributor of their product and told them, stop selling Tylenol capsules. Then they went to the public and said, we will trade you your capsules for the tablets, which were not tampered with, for free. So arguably they saved a whole bunch of lives. Now afterwards, there's a lot of people, a lot of conspiracy theorists saying they deliberately covered up who did it, whatever else. Frankly, I don't know, and I don't much care. I know that as a marketer, I feel like they did exactly what they were supposed to do. Right? That's the kind of stuff that makes or breaks a career. This established Johnson & Johnson, and especially Tylenol, as the most trusted brand in pain relievers in the world. And it's probably earned at this point, right? They had the worst possible thing happen to their product. Their medication started killing people. There's nothing worse than that. And they did absolutely all the right things. Switching to a less serious example. This is from years and years ago. I had a client who sold bridesmaid dresses. We launched a new website. Within a few days, sales and leads and everything from their site just plunged. Immediately, he's like, gotta switch back, put up the old website, take down the new one. He's calling me, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 9 o'clock at night, oh God. And so I looked around, I said, this may not have anything to do with that, because there's a winter storm across like 2/3 of the country, and lots of people have no power, they have no internet access, they got nothing. So maybe this is happening because they can't even get there. So then I was able to show them website traffic and say, look at this, your website traffic plunged. Your conversion rate actually went up by a factor of 3, went up much more than you lost traffic. And sure enough, as soon as the storm went away, things started to get better. He was in danger of that inversion thing, right? But was able to pull back from it with the right information. Because it turned out this was not really scary, scary stuff. And that's the other thing you can do, is you can prevent the paralysis by showing yourself or your customer or your boss, this is not as bad as it looks. This is not really something that will permanently injure the brand. So the things you have to balance as a marketer is you have to balance how to respond when something really terrible does happen with knowing how to figure out whether something really terrible is happening. So in some ways you have a tougher job than an actuary, a tougher job than an attorney, a tougher job than an accountant, because people are going to come to you first. They're going to come to you first and ask these questions, because then they can blame you later. right? When they're sitting in front of Congress, they can say, well, the marketing guy told me to do it. I'm surprised that has not come up yet with healthcare.gov. I'm still amazed that nobody came in and said, well, this was what our marketing firm told us to do. Yeah, Ian did it. Yes, it did, but it did work. Just saying. I'm kind of squishy liberal, in case you're wondering. You probably already get that. Lesson 5 from all this is just do something, okay? In gaming, the thing I find most aggravating is being chopped into fist-sized chunks by some horrible creature or bad guy while everyone else sits there at the table either texting or talking to each other or saying, huh, and then what happens? That drives me crazy. Okay, I'll even look at people and say, hello, something's happening here. They still don't do it. This is the worst possible thing that can happen in a game. It's the worst thing that can happen anywhere. And in marketing, it can get really ugly, right? Because you go to the client and you say, hey, you know what, your site loads slowly, change this one thing, it'll go this much faster, and you'll sell more stuff. Okay, I'll get to that. And then 8 months go by, the site's still loading slowly. If you can adapt and do it faster than other people, do really well. I'm not picking on them, but in the last presidential election, the Republican Party, which surprised me because in the election before they did very well in social media, but in the last presidential election, they completely screwed the pooch. They utterly blew it. They had all their people picking up phones and calling and saying, oh, we're ahead in the polls, we're tied in the polls, not realizing that 50% of their voting population didn't have landlines anymore. Right? They were all on Facebook.
Now it's 60.
Now it's 60%, yes. CompUSA. They start seeing in-store sales drop because their stores suck. What do? They get rid of all the really good salespeople and keep the bad ones. That's a solution. Gourmet Magazine completely ignores organic SEO on social media for years. And then Condé Nast is shocked when it plows into the ground at 1,000,000 miles an hour. I don't know. He who sits on his butt will get it kicked. That's the rule. There are practical problems here. In a game, how can you get other characters involved? Well, if you're the dungeon master, you can drop very, very serious hints. You know, you guys are supposed to be good characters, and a friend of yours is about to get chopped up. Or, hey, maybe you should do X or Y. Right? Those are all things you can do. In marketing, it actually is easier, because you can tap people's competitive instincts. So you can go to a client and say, hey, you know what? Your site is really slow. And if you just go and say your site's slow, you need to make it faster, they're going to say, yeah, so what? Why? Why do I care? If you use a tool like webpagetest.org and show them that their site is slower than a competitor's site, I guarantee you they will start getting on that as if someone lit their chair on fire. Right? Because they'll just be like, oh, what's going on here? I don't know. We got to fix this right away. That will work 90% of the time. Another place where you got to do something. Okay? You're spending 4% of your budget on 0.61% of your traffic, and yes, this was about 0.3% of their conversions, so you had to persuade them to do it. I couldn't do it forever until I brought up the same data, this is from SEMrush, for a competitor and showed them how different it was. You can show them really obvious things, like, maybe you should use email. Email. They're still not using email. Use the systems they're used to. You want to get them moving. And actually, this is also very true in gaming. There are dozens and dozens of different gaming systems out there now. For people who know gaming, there's GURPS, there's D20, there's all these different things out there. If you use the system your players are used to, they are much more likely to participate. Because learning a new game system, these are really complicated things. It's a pain to learn. You're much more comfortable. So same thing with clients. If you can use the tools that they're used to using, particularly if you're giving them recommendations, delivering data, use their report format, use their recommendation system. Much more likely for it to work. And of course, bribery works all the time. I've taken many people to lunch or dinner trying to persuade them, please, I am not the great Satan. Just listen for a minute. Here's why. I hear your pain, and you can learn lots of good stuff this way. So bribery works great. The next lesson. How am I doing for time? I'm doing okay. The The next critical lesson here really is return on time invested. So the first thing people invest in anything is time, right? No matter what you're doing, the first thing you do is decide, I'm going to take some time to do it. I don't care what it is. In Dungeons and Dragons, same thing. There's a lot of things you're going to have to do. You're going to have to stay up late. Just goes with it. And if you're me, you turn into a pumpkin at midnight. So you've got to, there's some real energy involved. You're going to eat crappy food, because that's all there is when you're gaming for some reason. All food turns into pretzels and chocolate. And non-caffeinated things, that's not really crap, is it? And for some reason, you can't get food anywhere but a pizza. You make yourself a social outcast. If I'm going to do that, you got to tell me that the time I'm going to invest is worth it. And this is true of everyone: visitors to websites, characters in the game. All of us get a little rush of happy juice, just like him. He's happy little dude. When they introduce a cool new character in a game, or they get to a website that really helps them out, or the Dungeon Master says something like, you open the chest, and there's some cool stuff inside. Those all provide a return on time invested. So as a quick aside, I did some math. I figured out that over the years, I've probably collected about 330,000 gold pieces, which is this measure of wealth in Dungeons & Dragons. I did not figure this out, but somebody else apparently figured out the average weight of a gold piece. So I figured out how much it weighed. It was 110,000 ounces of gold. Gold's dropped since, but it was about $143 million. If you stack them up, the Ptolemy Empire State Building. I just think it's kind of cool, right? But who cares? It's all this wealth, right? So what is all I can say. So yeah, I am. How does that really provide me a return on time invested? No, because I got to play for a while to get to those gold pieces. So why did I stick around? Well, maybe the snacks were good. Maybe the story's really good. Maybe it's just really good friends playing, which is the case. I've been playing with the same group of people for 20 years because it's very hard to find emotionally stable people who are really good gamers who will get together regularly. And when they do it, they will not leave their children, like playing with knives and matches behind the house or something. It's surprisingly hard to find those people. So yes, we stick together. Regardless, there's an instant return on time invested. Instantly. If there isn't, players start to kind of melt away. In marketing, return on time invested is much easier to figure out. It's content. I do not care what you make. I do not care what you sell. I do not care what your business is. I don't care if your website is delivered on cell phones directly to people's brains. I don't care. You must have good content. And I don't mean blog posts. Sure, have great blog posts. That's awesome. Okay? But content is everything. It's the pictures people look at of your products. It's the text about your board of directors. It's everything. And if you want that return on time invested instantly when people get to your site, don't sound like a moron. It's a really good place to start. Make sure your site's fast. I already talked about this a little bit. One thing is, please don't have an image that's 4 pixels wide that is also a file that is 75 kilobytes. Anyone here who knows anything about the web knows how ridiculous that is. These folks, they didn't hire us, but I presented this to them and I said, here's your freebie, okay? This is 1/3 of your homepage. Download it, and it's this big. Can you please, and then I gave them the file. I said, 2 kilobytes right here. They still haven't done it. I'm not going to explain all the things about web performance because it's a whole other 4-hour course, but just go install YSlow in your browser, run it on your site. It will give you lots of good advice. Readability. Reading text online is hard. And in fact, in gaming, just reading the rules is really hard. One of the things that players will always look for in a system is an index at the back of the primary rulebook that is not completely awful. Please, God, just let me find the page that tells me about how much damage my sword does. That's all I want. Please. Well, online, it's about readability because it's very challenging. You're trying to find stuff quickly. This may be great writing, It's very hard to read. I feel like I'm being put in a box that's slightly too small. That looks a lot better because it starts to spread out a little bit. Right? It's a little bit easier to read. The line spacing is better. I really have no instinctive design skills. I'm not a designer. But that's okay because there are tools out there that will let you figure out the basics of this. So you don't have to know instinctively what the right line spacing is. This is a tool on a site called Personify, and it calculates ideal typography based on the golden ratio, which is this idea in art and nature of 1.6 to 1. And it figures everything out for you. It'll tell you line spacing, it'll tell you page spacing, everything. It's really hot in here, sorry guys. So it'll tell you all that stuff. So you don't have to know how to do it, you just have to get your starting point from a tool like this. These guys are awesome. I love their tools, so I can make fun of them. They have writing on their homepage. Noseby is celebrating 6 years in business and growing strong thanks to recommendations from thousands upon thousands of our users who trust our top-notch security infrastructure to get things done through our web interface as well as our native apps. Whoa! See that? I couldn't even wait. For Mac, Windows, Android, and iPhone and iPad. I almost passed out the first time I read that. Okay, that is crazy. That is crazy. So then I went to this site that calculates readability using this formula called Flesch-Kincaid reading ease. It is not the be-all and end-all, but if I already think it's kind of too complicated, and then it shows me that out of 100 it scores a 25, and also, by the way, you have to be in 20th grade to read that text, something's wrong. Something is very wrong. Spelling. I have no words. Okay? This is not a porn site. Okay? It's a real estate website. It's still there. Just do a search for please link here. I'm not responsible for other things that show up in your search results. Learn to write well. Okay? The first really talented writer I ever met was someone who ran a writing center at the college I went to. And he hired me. And his rule that he said almost every day was write every day. Okay? Write every day. Sit down for 5 minutes and write something. I don't care what it is. You don't have to show it to anyone. Just write. You need to get better at writing. Words are the most basic form of communication on the internet, and they will be for a long, long time. So yeah, video is important, all this other stuff's important, but learn to write well, or hire someone who's already learned. Again, start to measure what's performing and what's not. Figure out what good content is and what isn't. Avoid the gazebo. Any gamers here know about the gazebo myth? No? Oh my God. I can tell you the story afterwards. It's too long right now. I'll just tell you if you want to, go on the internet and search for Eric, the tale of Eric and the gazebo. It's hilarious. Just don't have any beverage in your mouth because you will pop it out of your teeth. Another version of it is the client who says, we don't sell jeans, we sell denim. That is fantastic. Unfortunately, only 1 out of 1,000 people search for denim. Can we please use the word jeans and then educate them as to the error of their ways? You got to use the language your audience is using. That's better content. And you can use tools like Unbounce. You can look at on-site search. Right? You can use any of these things to figure out what are the words they're really using. You don't have to guess as much as you used to. Sorry, it was Unbounce. Unbounce. It's a tool that lets you build landing pages and test them very rapidly. Because it's very easy to edit and change those pages. Optimizely is another great one. And what it lets you do is just put different wording on the page and see what gets the best response. So content, return on time invested, really important. If you want a good gaming group, return on time invested. Have good snacks, at least the first few times, right? Then you start making other people cook the snacks. When I was really broke in school and we were gaming, that's what I did every time. Lesson 7. No one cares about the cows. I'm going to tell you a story here. One of the best dungeon masters I have ever played with is a guy who would build out his world fantastically well. Unfortunately, he would build them out to the point where in an entire nation, he would know all the farmers, he would know how many cows each of them had, and he would know the relative health of each cow. Seriously. He would know so that if, in case we decided to go on a cow-killing rampage, we would know exactly what was necessary. No one cares about the cows. Okay? For me, it becomes an ego thing, right? If I'm writing content about portent, if I'm talking to someone about portent, I want to go down into everything. I want to talk about every tool we have. I want to talk about, at a microscopic level, every technique we have. You've got to get ego out of the equation. Focus on the end, not the means. Yeah, we've got all these great tools. Yes, there are cows out there that become foods that the players can eat so that they can go on their adventures. Okay? That doesn't really matter. You got to answer, so what? The CEO of Portent now, Steve Gaylor, one of his favorite sayings is, so what? Not in a mean way, he's just saying, you're putting together a product, you're making a pitch for something, so what? What's the reason I want this? You don't have to tell me how it's made. If I ask you what time it is, do not tell me how the watch works. It's one of my favorite. Nancy Reagan said that about Ronald Reagan. If you ask him what time it is, he will tell you how the watch works. Specialized makes bicycle tires and bicycles and stuff. They are a great example of this in real life. Okay? If I go here and I'm a cyclist, I know exactly what I want. I want a tire for a competition. I want a tire for all season. I want a tire for cyclocross, whatever. So that's what they put there. And then I want to know that this tire is going to make me faster. I mean, it's not going to, but I want to feel like it's going to, right? So that when I show up for my next ride, someone says, hey, did you get new tires? I say, well, yes, I got the Iceworks Turbo. Try and keep up with me today. That way, when there's a dot disappearing in the distance, you can really feel it. You're excited now. And then they put a quote from a well-known cyclist, a well-known racer, a triathlete, I chopped his name off, sorry, that further verifies that, but it's all about so what. And then if you want more stuff, you can get it. Yes, I'm enough of a cycling nerd that I actually do want to worry about how many threads per inch there are, because I know that that will protect me from getting sidewall flats on my tires. There you go. In case you thought I was only a gaming nerd. Schwinn, on the other hand, can someone tell me why I would want to buy this bike? Anyone? Is there anything on here? Does it say it's fun? Does it even say, buy the damn bike? No. I have no idea why I would buy this bike. And you can find out on this page everything. The fact that it's basically made out of iron and weighs 42 pounds. The fact that it uses all crappy components. The fact that it's the best technology that 2003 had to offer. I'm not a big Schwinn fan anymore. My first bike was a Schwinn Stingray, but they're kind of doomed. There's nothing here. Look at this. The first thing you see, Schwinn MTB Trail aluminum frame and SR Sun Tour. The Sun Tour was still around. XCT version 3 suspension fork for rugged durability and comfort. Finally, durability and comfort. After you pounded me to death making me read stuff. So the whole comfort thing, that's for sure. In short, I want roast beef. I don't want cows. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. In the end, so what? Why are all these cows really here? I'm not going to go fight them all. And if I do, make something up. Okay? Just don't worry about it. Another important one. Every now and then, everyone needs to be a hero. Everyone needs to slay a monster. It is a fact of life. We all go through times where we want to be a hero. How many people here have watched Unbreakable? Bruce Willis movie? The story in that movie really is every kid wants their father to be a superhero. When you see the look on the kid's face at the end when he realizes that his dad is really a superhero, it's amazing. And that's what this is really about. Everybody wants to be a hero sometimes. And slaying bad guys is heroic. It just is. It's one of the reasons I like gaming so much, is because in real life, you spend lots of time doing the things that are important, but not that interesting, right? I love what I do for a living. I don't necessarily want to have to look at budget numbers and stuff, which is actually why there's a CEO now, and I'm not there. I'm sorry. I don't like D&D games where you have to do all the real-world stuff, like go from cow to get your roast beef, because that's all the stuff that will grind you down to a mud, and you get enough of that in real life. I want to do the heroic stuff, and it needs to be heroic. If it's too easy, it gets stupid. In gaming, this is a phenomenon called the Monty game, as in Monty Python. So you're going from place to place, you're just getting more and more good stuff, and it's pointless. Why does it become pointless? Why is it boring? Because we all expect a story arc. We all expect this. If it's flat, it's pointless. And in our lives, it's almost never flat. If it's flat, we start to talk about things like it was anticlimactic, which is not always a bad thing, but it comes up. In gaming, it goes something like this. You're sitting in a bar. It happens all the time. Some dude comes up to you, or you overhear some dude talking about some horrible catastrophe that's falling something. And then if you don't do that, that's the one time when the dungeon master may sort of push you a little, like, okay, this is the game, guys. I want to play it over here. You get the job. Something goes horribly wrong, and there's much screaming and slashing and running. And then you either end up in pieces, or you get cold treasure. Real life, you're just kind of going through your day-to-day, you run into a problem, you say, crap, and then hopefully you fix it. In marketing, you start with discovery. Discovery. You happen across things before you need them. Social media is fantastic for this. Then, you start to have a problem show up and you begin to research. That's where search engines come into it, right? Then you make a buying decision, and then you get some kind of reward, hopefully, right? That's the perfect story arc for us as marketers. What it really breaks down to, if you're keeping it as basic as possible, social search site, and then whatever the reward is. Lesson 9, learn your shit. I love bringing new people into gaming, and I'm very patient. But if we've played 5 times, and every single time we play, every time something comes around to you, around the table to do something, you have to start all over again and take 5 minutes just to figure it out. Yeah, that gets old in a hurry. Okay, you got to learn your shit. Now, you read the rules, right? And then you also read some of the classics and watch some of the classics, and you learn about the game, about the world, about the environment. I did some more math. Okay. I've been a gamer for 33 years. I put in about 300 hours per year, so I put in about 9,900 hours compared to 7,500 in law school, which explains a lot. So yeah, nerd. Learning marketing, I've spent 45,000 hours to date. And I still don't know so many things. I still get to learn so many new things all the time. It sounds corny, but it's part of what's really cool about it. So I'm constantly learning new stuff, which, by the way, goes back to every other rule you've heard about, right? Especially do something. Don't just sit there. So read the classics. Read Ogilvy on advertising. Read tested advertising methods, written by a guy in like 19-teens or 1920s. And it is still true today. This guy was further ahead on multivariate testing than 9/10 of internet marketers today. Read this book by Robert Cialdini, You May Never Leave Your House Again. So it may make you so paranoid, but it is brilliant. And read Avinash's book, Web Analytics 2.0. It will give you a very clear idea of how you apply analytics without being an analytics specialist. And just try stuff. Again, don't be afraid of the little things. And if you need to try stuff on yourself, go for it, right? Build yourself a little website, learn how HTML works. Take $10 of your own money and send send clicks to some page where you're selling something that affiliate, you can get an affiliate contract for. Whatever. Just try stuff. And then finally, last lesson. And remember I said I bookended this with the 2 biggest lessons. I'm a total marketing idealist. Kind of weird to be a liberal who's not a cynic. I'm cynical about everything else, but in marketing, I'm not a cynic. So you got to be good. In gaming, a lot of people like to play evil characters. I have never found that particularly interesting because you spend all your time running away from all the good characters. And eventually, they catch up to you and chop you into little chunks. It's not worth it. I've always preferred to play the good guys. It's just more interesting to me. Because again, you want to be heroic. You can't be heroic if you're screwing some poor little old lady out of her cows. Okay. So, I prefer chaotic good. There's this whole alignment system in gaming. There's how crazy you are, which is chaotic to lawful. And then there's how good or bad you are, good to evil. So I go for like Captain Kirk or Han Solo, not the namby-pamby guys like, I don't know, Superman. Really annoying. So things to avoid. Don't cheat. All right? In gaming, if you cheat, you will get punted out of the game so fast, your head will spin. Because it's stupid. It's a game. Why are you cheating? Who cares? Your character's written on a piece of paper. If you die, you take the same piece of paper and say, here's his long-lost twin brother. Who cares? Don't cheat. In marketing, don't cheat. Okay, there's so many ways to cheat. Don't do it. All the penalties are happening right now with Google. If you care about nothing else but SEO, to Google, you're cheating. You can complain about how evil they are. You can complain about how unfair it is. They have warned us time and time again. You are cheating. Just understand the risks if you're going to do it. Do not tragedy surface, because I will show you on slides for the rest of your existence as a brand. This was the stupidest tweet, aside from the PR person who made this horrible tweet about going to Africa. But this is one of the stupidest tweets I have ever seen. Are you kidding me? This was the day she died. Are you kidding me? Who thought? It wasn't anyone at Microsoft, you know that. It was some company, some agency like ours. Some person somewhere had sent it. From then on, it like cascaded up. This is more chaotic stupid than chaotic good. It's just stupid, okay? Just don't do it. It's cheating. And this may offend some people, but how many people know who this is? Goebbels. Yeah. He was the head of propaganda for Hitler's Nazi government. I'm not saying this to shock people. I'm saying this to show you that cheating, telling lies, doing things like that, has a profound effect. You're going to have to deal with me getting a little bit preachy here, but he was a marketer too. He was just a really bad one. And if you want to if I want to really bookend this discussion, the thing you need to understand is that great communications, to me, can save the world. That's why I started Porting. Okay? They can also completely screw the world. Marketing is communications. So please, try to be chaotic good about it. Don't cheat. Find that audience. Be a really good service to your clients. Keep the rules here in mind. If you do, you're always going to lean towards this. That's all I got.